Lawyer presiding, be seated and remain quiet, please.
Good morning. The court is in session. The lawyers are present, the defendant is present, and the jurors are all present and ready to be lined up to come in. Are both sides ready? State?
Ready,
Defense?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you.
Jurors are entering.
The jurors are present. Everyone else may be seated. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Whoever is the point person from the defense for the next witness, go ahead and call your next witness when you're ready.
Okay, thank you, Judge. Dr. Lori Karp.
Good morning. Good morning. Please remain standing, please.
Good morning. Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. You can be seated. And when you're seated, please lean into the microphone, which is the standing stationary microphone, and state your full name and spell your last name.
Sure. My name is Dr. Lori Karp, K-A-R-P-F.
If you can, I know you're petite. Can you
Okay.
speak more so we can hear you a little bit better? Thank you.
Sure.
Mrs. Curtis, you too, please.
Okay,
Thank you.
I will. Thank you. Good morning, doctor. How are you?
Good morning.
Okay. Can you please tell the jury what type of doctor you are?
I'm a child and adolescent and adult psychiatrist,
Okay, and how long have you been a practicing psychiatrist?
30 years.
how does a person become a psychiatrist? What are the educational requirements?
Sure. Beyond college, you do 4 years of medical school, and then you do a year of internship and residency, and if you specialize in a fellowship like child and adolescent psychiatry, it's an extra 2 years of child psych training.
Okay. And you are also a medical doctor?
Yes.
Okay. And generally, can you tell us what is the role of a psychiatrist regarding a patient's mental health?
Mainly a psychiatrist deals with the medication management as part of a comprehensive treatment plan involving educational resources and therapy and behavioral therapy, and if there are developmental issues, speech therapy and things like that. The medications are designed to decrease the symptoms so they can better use the other resources around them.
Okay, so what you do is different than what a psychologist would do. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, and different from what a therapist would do.
I do more of the medication management.
Okay. So a person with mental health problems, seeing a psychiatrist is not necessarily a substitute for therapy or counseling. It's in addition to.
Yes.
Okay. In terms of documentation, what is your general practice in terms of like note keeping?
Usually after the session or during, I'll take some notes, and you'll usually write a progress note by the end of the day.
Okay, and is that the same regardless of whether your patient is a child, an adolescent, or an adult?
Yes.
Okay. Did you treat Nikolas Cruz?
I did.
Okay, beginning when?
July of '08.
Okay, and for how long?
Approximately 3.5 years.
Okay, so through about December of 2011?
Correct.
Okay, so do you remember how old Nikolas would have been in '08?
I think he was just turning 10. It was a while ago. Yeah, 9 3/4.
Okay. So then you treated him up until he was about 13. Is that right?
Okay.
Okay. Do you have an independent memory of him?
I remember him. Any details, I have my notes to answer specific questions.
Okay. Okay, so you do remember him, but you may sometimes need to refer to your notes for dates or dosages or things like that.
10 years ago. So.
Okay. Judge, may I have one moment?
Sure.
All right.
I'm going to show the suit. What's been marked as defense W. May I approach the witness?
You may.
Ma'am, I'm showing you what's been marked for identification as defense 1W. Do you recognize that?
Appears to generally be a copy of my chart, my notes.
Okay. And what's contained in your file on Mr. Cruz?
There's a treatment summary. There's a list of medications that were prescribed. There's some miscellaneous notes. Let's see what else. A couple of other correspondence that was sent in, copy of the prescriptions.
Okay. And you said there was a treatment summary. When was that done?
In 2018.
Okay, so this was several years after you concluded your treatment of Nikolas Cruz, the summary part.
Yes, it was when records were requested from me.
Okay, yeah, so, and this, the request was done after the shooting, correct? Okay. What about the other notes, the medication documentation and the treatment notes? When were those
Would have been done at the time they were dated, at the days of each appointment.
Okay. And do these notes fairly and accurately depict your treatment and experience with Nikolas Cruz from 2008 to 2011?
Yes.
Okay.
We would be requesting to enter what's been marked as 1W into evidence.
State, do you have any objection?
No. Okay, without objection, Defense Composite Exhibit 1W for identification will be received as Defense 35.
What grade was Nicholas going into when he first came to you in the summer of 2008?
Third?
Third grade. Okay. Do you remember his mother, Linda?
I do.
How did they end up coming to you, if you remember?
They were referred by their pediatrician,
And who was that?
Dr. David Marcus.
Okay. When Nicholas came to you, had he already been diagnosed with something?
He was diagnosed with ADHD.
Okay. And did you find out whether he was receiving any type of therapeutic services?
Yes.
Okay, what were those?
Mom said he was seeing a counselor, Dr. Kravitz.
Okay. So she told you he was seeing Dr. Kravitz, and this was in July of 2008?
Yes.
Okay. Did she say he was getting any other type of therapeutic services?
I'm sure he was already involved with special education, probably an IEP or special education in the school district system.
Okay, and so you're talking about like a family counselor that you get if you have a behavioral disability with your IEP? Is that what you're talking about?
It's also educational, sometimes extra time on exams or
Oh.
an individual educational plan.
Okay. Was Nicholas already taking medication when he came to you?
He was.
And do you remember what that was?
He was taking Focalin XR20 and Strattera 25 milligrams.
Okay. Did you consult with anyone prior to first meeting Nicholas on July 3rd of 2008?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Did you speak with his mother before the appointment?
Oh, yes.
Okay. And did she relay to you any concerns she had about Nicholas?
Yes, she was concerned about irritability, low frustration tolerance, anxiety, tantrums,
Okay.
sibling rivalry.
Okay. Excuse me. What about aggressive behavior?
Yes,
Okay. Did she tell you that Nicholas was adopted?
she did.
And did she give you any information regarding the circumstances of his birth or the birth mother's pregnancy with him?
I have that it was a C-section, weighed about 6 pounds. My notes just say it was a general healthy pregnancy.
Okay, so she didn't give you any information about drug use by the mother,
No, just
alcohol
no
use?
specific details.
No details. Okay. And what did you think about Linda after you first met her?
She was a good woman. She tried to be a good mom to her 2 kids. She had her hands full. Her husband had passed, and she had 2 boys with special needs.
Yeah. Okay, what about Nicholas? What did you first think about him when you met him?
He separated from his mom. He came in and spoke easily. Didn't like doing homework, taking showers, some typical, 9-year-old stuff, a little bit fidgety, inattentive, a little bit on the immature side for his age.
Okay, and you told us that he was already, when he came to you, taking Focalin, XR, and Strattera. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, and were you able to find out from his records or whatever information you had when he began taking those medications? At what age?
My records don't have a specific date.
Okay, do you have an independent recollection of that?
Not really.
Okay. Now, is it, when he came to you, he was almost 10. Is it common for a child of his age to be taking those medications?
If they have ADHD, yes.
Okay. How long did your appointments with him usually last?
Generally 15 minutes to a half hour, other than the initial 2 sessions.
Okay, those are longer?
Yeah.
When you're treating a child, how do you determine whether the medication is working as it's intended to work?
A young child, usually parent feedback is your best source. You know, the parent will say, are they sleeping? Are they eating? Are they doing their homework? How's their temper? How's their mood?
Okay, and when you're treating a child, how do you determine whether the child is experiencing any side effects that might be problematic?
Again, through report of either the child or the mom having trouble sleeping, decreased appetite, stomach aches, headaches, things like that.
Okay, and how do you determine whether the child is actually taking the medication at the appropriate time and at the appropriate dose?
Your best guess, you have to trust that the parent is doing it appropriately.
Okay, so let's talk about the medications. Can you tell the jury, what is Focalin XR?
Sure. It's a stimulant medication, which is the class of medications that's most commonly used for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD.
Okay, and is that different from regular Focalin?
The stimulants come in kind of two varieties. There's the immediate release, which lasts about 4 hours, where if they're in a school day, they have to, at lunchtime, go to the nurse and get a second dose, or in later days, there's ones that have XR at the end of the name, or LA for long-acting extended release, so it's a capsule that has the short-acting and the long-acting in one capsule, so they can take it in the morning. It should last them 6 hours, 8 hours, so that's preferred.
Okay. What about Strattera? What is that?
Strattera is a non-stimulant for ADHD. The stimulant medications work very well, but they're kind of self-limited, so if you take it in the morning, it'll wear off 6 hours later. Strattera works 24 hours and usually can be used along with a stimulant for the times before they take the stimulant in the morning, so when they have to get ready in the morning before the stimulant has kicked in, or at the end of the day when the stimulant is worn off.
Are there any potential problematic side effects with Strattera?
Every medication has side effects. Potentially there can be stomach ache, there can be agitation, rarely liver, you follow liver function tests.
Okay. After the first visit in July of 2003, or at that visit, did you make any changes to Nikolas's medication?
I think towards the very beginning we lowered the Focalin to 10 because he was having a little bit of, the stimulants can sometimes cause movements, tics like blinking or mouth movements, so we lowered the stimulant a little bit and we started increasing the non-stimulant.
Okay, so increasing the Strattera?
Increasing the Strattera.
Okay. And did you receive any feedback from Linda about how that was working?
She felt he was doing better on the Strattera 40. He had started on 25 and we'd raised it. She said his temper was a little bit better. He was getting punished less often. He had gained a little bit of weight. The stimulants sometimes decrease appetite. And she felt he was doing well, a little bit less distracted, a little bit less impulsive. She was pleased.
Okay. And did you, as you were treating Nikolas, did you ask Linda to write you notes about how he was doing?
Not specifically, but she did, usually come in with some kind of summary of what had gone on since I had seen him last.
Okay. And when was your second visit with him?
It was an August visit, I think, and then a September visit. June 25th was first time, July 3rd was second time, July 20-something, 29th, I think, was third visit. That was the one where he was doing a little bit better, tolerating the Strattera, temper better.
Okay. And you had a visit with him in September of 2008, you said?
I did.
Okay. And did Linda write you a note for that visit?
I can look. Hold on 1 second. Sorry about that.
That's okay. And so by September, while you're looking, September of 2008, he would have started third grade, correct? He would have been in school.
Yeah, we usually start mid-August. November of '08. Oh, September of '08. Yes, she wrote me a note.
Okay, and what were her concerns at that time?
Trouble with anger, cursing at a teacher, trashing his desk. Didn't want to do math homework, put his math book in the pool.
I'm sorry,
Put his math book in the pool.
Okay, and then, did she tell you anything else?
I don't have the back of that note here. Copied. That's all I have here. If you have
If I were to show you a copy of that note, would it perhaps refresh your recollection?
yeah.
It's on. May I first witness?
You may.
If you want to just read it.
Sorry, yeah, I have
To
the
yourself,
front.
and then that's okay. And then there's a second page.
I have the front page of the note. I just didn't have the second.
I'm sorry, ma'am, I can't hear you.
Oh, so I have the front page of the note. I didn't have the.
Okay.
Okay, so this is what I have. Took apart the mailbox, threw it in the street using bad words,
I'm sorry,
cursing.
ma'am, could you just speak up a little bit more for me? I'm having trouble hearing you.
Using bad words, cursing, screaming and yelling a lot, repeating himself.
Okay, and you said something about a mailbox?
Looks like he took apart the mailbox and threw it in the street.
Okay, and did you make a medication change with that visit?
We increased the Strattera to 50 milligrams.
And at this time, he was just about to turn 10, correct?
Correct.
Okay. When was your next medication change for him?
Probably October.
Okay, do you know the date?
October 15th.
Okay, so about 3 weeks later. Mm-hmm. Okay, and what was the change that you made in October?
In October, we decreased the Strattera to see if that was agitating him, and we added a low dose of a mood stabilizer called Risperdal.
Okay, and what is Risperdal?
It's a mood stabilizer. It's usually used to decrease aggression. It's also used for people who are bipolar, schizophrenic, but it's used more for calming people.
Okay. And what happened that caused you to make that change in his medication?
The mother had told me that he had an incident in school where he had threatened to stab the teacher and an aide. He was aggressive, destroying property. Police were called.
Police were called to the school?
I would guess so. And so we added the Risperdal to see if it would help calm his moods and help the aggression and the episodes of blow-ups.
Okay. And did you make a note of your impression of him on that day? The day that she told you about the teacher?
By the time I saw him, he was currently not an acute danger to himself or others, and I didn't feel he required hospitalization, and we changed the medication, and we're watching to see what happened.
Okay. And did that change improve the situation?
I believe so. I got a call from the mom a couple days later that he was calmer at home, doing better in school.
Okay. And so did he stay on that medication regimen for a while?
He stayed on the Risperdal and the Focalin. We discontinued the Strattera a few weeks later
Okay, why?
on the chance that the Strattera was agitating him.
Okay, was there some incident that made you think think that was a good idea to do?
I got a phone call that he was still being a little bit aggressive in school. He had hit a classmate with a lunchbox, so we decided to discontinue the Strattera and consider increasing the Risperdal.
Okay, and did Linda at that time report any other concerning behaviors to you?
What date are you talking?
On, let me just check. I think it's October 30th.
My note just says, still aggressive in school, hit a peer with a lunchbox, will discontinue Strattera, consider increasing the Risperdal.
Okay. Did she tell you anything about picking behavior?
I don't see it on the note
Okay.
there. November 5th.
Okay.
There was he probably was
Okay,
picking.
when you see picking behavior, what does that signify to you?
Sometimes a little bit of a compulsive habit. Sometimes on the stimulants, kids can have, again, tics or picking, nail biting, things like that.
Okay, and other than that medication change, did you discuss anything else with Linda, make any recommendations to her that day?
We had discussed possibly, you're talking November 5th?
I think it's the 30th of October, but let me check. Oh, yes, I'm sorry, on November 5th. Correct.
We talked about possibly getting psychological testing, which I'm guessing the school district does regularly on him if he was in things, or maybe a neurological exam if the aggression continues.
Okay. Would a neurological exam be something that you would think the school would do?
Maybe not. They usually do more of this psychological testing, something they do what's called neuropsych testing, which sort of, involves the two.
Okay. And did you ever receive any information that that testing was done on Nikolas?
I don't have a specific copy of it in my chart, and I don't have independent recall from then, but I'm fairly certain if he was involved in the ESE program at the school, they would have done psychological testing every 3 years. That's, I think, the law.
Okay. When did you receive the next behavior report from Linda?
The next visit was November 20th.
Okay, and did she give you or tell you any concerns at that time?
Ripped up a planner, sleeping okay, eating okay. He seemed to be reading a little bit more, doing his homework, not cursing as much. He had hit somebody with a rock. He had cut his hair at one point when he was angry, and he was going to a therapeutic group called Tomorrow's Rainbow. I think it was a program for kids who had lost a parent.
Okay, and did you adjust his medications on that day?
We increased the Focalin a little bit from 10 to the XR 15.
Okay, why'd you do that?
Because he was still having some issues. He had, still done some impulsive, angry behaviors.
Okay, and throughout that year, about how often were you seeing him?
Probably from then on, it looks like it was about every other month or so.
Okay. Did you make any other recommendations to Linda other than that you get psychological testing and a neurological workup?
Well, he continued with the educational. He had a counselor at school that he saw very, very regularly, and he was in, the school did a lot of the interventions. There were times he was in either a smaller classroom setting if necessary. at some point, they had Henderson have in-home behavioralist, I think, come to the house.
Okay, and so you knew at the time that they were having Henderson come to their house?
At some point.
Okay, and did Linda tell you that she discontinued that shortly thereafter in January of 2010?
I can check. I don't have it specifically in my notes.
Okay, is that something you would have documented, that she discontinued that if she had told you that?
Probably.
Okay, and based on what you knew in terms of the circumstances or the situation with Nikolas, did you believe he was no longer in need of that type of service?
No, I'm sure I would have believed he would have needed ongoing treatment at that point.
Okay. Now, in 2010, did you add any new medications?
In August, we added Intuniv, which is another non-stimulant that works 24/7 in addition to the stimulant, which wears off.
Okay, and so at this point, he's still taking Focalin, and that seems to be helping, is that right?
Right.
And he's taking the Risperdal, and that seems to be helping.
Correct.
Is that right? Okay, and now you've added Intuniv.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and still no Strattera, right?
No, he stayed off it once we discontinued it.
Okay. And did Nikolas ever tell you about any problems he was having himself, or was it just Linda?
Nikolas too.
Okay, what did he tell you, if you remember?
Probably mainly about his brother, arguing with his brother.
Okay. Did he talk to you about getting in trouble at school?
I'm sure.
Okay, and then, so the last year you treated him was 2011, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and did Linda write you a note in March of 2011?
Yes.
Okay, do you remember what, if she had any concerns or what those were?
We had lowered the Focalin. Seems to be going fine, holding his own in class, got a B average last semester in all subjects. She had stopped the Risperdal at night, but she's thinking maybe to keep him on it twice a day because he was getting a little bit more active after summer. Tired when he gets home from school, going in the room to rest. Homework is getting done, or else he was resting again. Still gets upset when he doesn't get what he wants. Upset about a video game.
What did she tell you about?
Had a kind of a meltdown about not being able to get the video game. Overall, I think he's doing okay on the half capsule of Focalin.
Okay, did she give you any more information about that meltdown that he had, about the video game?
A Spider-Man game, it wasn't available, screamed and cried. She wasn't able to drive home, and then he calmed down, and I guess they drove home.
Okay, and he's 12 at this point, right?
March of 2011. Yes, 12 and a half.
Okay, so Linda told you that she tried to cut out his Risperdal, but that was not a good idea, apparently, she thought.
Yeah,
At that time.
I think she went back up on it.
Okay, and when was your last visit with him?
December 1st of, I think, 11.
Okay, and do you know why that was the last visit?
They had changed insurance companies, and she called and said they were going to switch to somebody who was on their insurance network.
Okay, and did she tell you anything about the Intuniv at that last visit?
She was thinking of lowering it down a little bit.
Did she tell you why?
There's a note from a phone call from the secretaries that the brother was also taking it, and at the time it was a brand name medication and it was expensive, and I told her that there are programs through the pharmaceutical companies to get coupons or vouchers or things like that, but
Okay, so you were trying to assist her because you thought he should continue taking it.
continue to stay on it, yeah.
Judge, may I have a moment?
You may.
I don't have any more questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Cross-examination?
Thank you. Good morning, Dr. Clark.
Morning.
So you are a child and adult psychiatrist, correct?
Yes,
And you're board certified?
yes, double board
What are you board certified in?
in child and adolescent psychiatry and in adult psychiatry.
And as part of your education and training, you did a residency and a fellowship, correct? Okay. So the defendant was referred to you by Dr. David Marcus, correct?
Correct,
And he's a pediatrician?
correct.
Okay. And your first meeting with Linda was in June of 2008?
Correct.
And that was just with Linda, not with the defendant?
Yes, usually if a child is under 12, 13, we usually do, the first part of the evaluation is history getting with just the parent.
Okay. So you got the background from her, and you learned that he was adopted? Yes?
Correct.
Just have to give a verbal. And the issues were there was some cursing going on,
Yes,
lying,
yes,
aggressive behavior.
yes,
He was still sleeping in bed with mom,
yes,
low frustration tolerance,
yes,
and issues with not getting along with his brother.
correct.
Okay. And did you get the impression that Linda was a very caring parent,
I did.
and she really wanted to get her son some assistance?
She did.
Yes,
She
yes.
did,
Okay.
yes.
And then you first met with the defendant in July,
Correct.
and that was just you and him. Mom was not in the room.
Probably if he's a minor, probably it was me and him for most of it, and generally I would bring a mom into the room towards the end.
Okay. And do you remember that day?
Not off the top of my head.
Okay. But do you remember the defendant was able to have a linear conversation with you?
Yes,
And he's communicating just fine?
yes,
Okay.
10-year-old.
I'm sorry.
For a 10-year-old, I mean, he spoke in complete sentences. He was able to separate from his mother in the waiting room and come in with me and
He had no problem
speak.
understanding you?
No,
Okay. And you had learned that Dr. Marcus had diagnosed him with ADHD.
correct.
Did you agree with that diagnosis?
I did.
And at that visit in July, you decided to make some adjustments to the medication?
Correct.
Okay. And then as the summer went on, 2008, the defendant was doing better?
Correct.
Okay. He was getting along with his friends?
I'd have to look specifically, but things were going a little bit better after we made the first changes.
He was stable?
Generally, yeah.
Okay. Linda was not having to discipline him as much,
Correct.
and he was less impulsive?
Correct.
Okay. And during this time, the defendant was also seeing Dr. Kravitz?
I'm not sure. I don't have anything specifically in the notes. I know when he first came in, it was summer, and when I asked who was his current therapist, it said Dr. Kravitz.
Okay.
But I don't have specific contact with Dr. Kravitz after that time.
But you did contact Dr. Kravitz at some point?
At one point, yeah.
Okay. And that's typical of you to do in your practice?
Sure.
Okay. Do you also recall a Mr. John Noonan?
Yes, I think that was a school counselor of his who knew him well and knew him over the years when he was in 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, and I had spoken to him a couple of times.
Okay. And so then we get into the school year, and you had to make some adjustments to the medication. You said on direct he had verbally threatened to stab a teacher and a teacher's assistant, and that was in October?
Correct.
Okay. And did he come in and speak with you around that time?
I'm sure.
And did you assess whether or not he was delusional?
Yes, he did not. On October 15th, it says that he denies delusions or hallucinations.
Okay, so he wasn't suicidal?
No.
You did not feel that he was a danger to himself
No.
or anybody else?
No, or I would have recommended hospitalization.
Okay, and what would that have been? A Baker Act?
Or voluntary if Linda would have taken him in, but I didn't feel he was at. By the time I saw him, the incident was over, he was calmed down.
Explain what a Baker Act is. When would you have done that if needed to be done?
Baker Act is an involuntary hospitalization if you believe someone is in acute danger to themselves, harming themselves or others.
Okay, and you didn't have any of those concerns?
Not at that time.
Okay. And so you made some adjustments to the medications, and would you say for the remainder of 2008, the defendant was pretty stable?
Correct.
Absent a few incidents at school, I think on direct there was a mention that the defendant had hit someone with a lunchbox and someone else with a rock, but...
Right, no serious aggressive behaviors.
When you learned of those, you made some more adjustments and then got the situation stable?
As best we could.
Okay. So by January of 2009, the defendant was doing pretty well.
Correct.
He was sleeping in his own bed, right?
Okay.
And he's still seeing John Newham and Dr. Kravitz?
I'm not sure about Dr. Kravitz. I know he was seeing Dr. Noonan weekly every Tuesday.
And he was also in that grievance counseling, Tomorrow's Rainbow.
Correct. Correct.
So for the 2009 school year, would you say he was pretty stable?
Correct.
When you had your conversations with him, did you ever observe him act up? Or I should say, strike that. Did he ever have aggressive behavior when you were speaking with him?
Not that I recall.
He was, again, able to communicate with you, and he was coordinated.
Yes.
Okay. Did you get the impression that the defendant could control his behavior if he so chose?
Not to a point. 10-year-old kids have low frustration tolerance. They're immature. There may have been developmental issues. ADHD kids tend to be impulsive. He had low frustration tolerance, mood instability. So when things are going well, they can control their behavior pretty well. And he was able to behave appropriately in appointments. But I'm sure when something frustrated him or agitated him, it was kind of beyond his control.
Well,
the medication was designed to
That's when you make the
minimize that.
adjustments.
Hold
Right.
on, let her,
Sorry.
one at a time, let her finish her answer, please. Ma'am, would you just repeat that one more time, because the talking was, she
Okay.
was talking the same time as you were.
Oh, okay.
I apologize.
I said we use the medication to try and raise the frustration tolerance, decrease impulsivity, keep mood and anxiety under control. But when kids like that get upset, get frustrated, it's very difficult for them to control their behavior. They're kids, they haven't learned all the behavioral skills, and they don't have the maturity always to control their behavior.
Okay. And at this time, now in 2009, you learned that the defendant was being treated by Henderson.
Correct.
Did you have any conversations with a Caridad Blancho from Henderson?
It says it, I don't honestly recall it, but I saw a note that we had a consent form and that we spoke.
Okay. So then throughout 2010, 2011, just continued making adjustments as needed, and the defendant was relatively stable.
Correct.
And same thing, 2011, we're approaching 2012. Your last visit was December 18th, 2011?
I think December 1st, but yes.
Did I miss?
No, I think somewhere along the way there was a typo, but
Okay.
just beginning of December
Okay.
11.
And he was doing well?
Seemed to be doing pretty well.
Mood was good?
Yeah, seemed to be getting along with his brother, seeing friends, a couple of C's and a couple B's, getting help with reading.
So overall, he'd done pretty well.
Yes.
And as mentioned on direct, Linda would often provide handwritten notes of how he was doing, and some of those notes indicate he was doing excellent.
Yes.
Would you say Linda was an advocate for the defendant?
Absolutely.
And when the defendant stopped treating with you, he didn't just stop treatment, he went on to treat with another
Correct.
doctor, correct? Are you aware he started treating with Dr. Megan in January of 2012?
Not, I didn't know specifically who he was seeing.
And your main diagnosis was ADHD.
Yes.
Did you have any secondary diagnosis?
He probably was oppositional defiant disorder.
Okay. And are you still satisfied with those diagnoses?
At that time, yes.
Are you familiar with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder?
I am.
Okay. And if you had learned of any prenatal alcohol exposure, that wouldn't have changed your treatment plan for the defendant, would it?
Not really. You still medicate the symptoms you're seeing regardless of what the etiology
You're treating the behavior.
is. Yeah.
And did you get the impression that Linda was doing everything she could to help the defendant?
I did.
And obviously you learned what happened on February 14th, 2018.
I did.
And do you think there's anything about your evaluations or treatment that would have led you to think that the defendant would kill 17 people?
No.
May I have a moment?
You may.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kopp. I have no question.
Curtis, can you redirect?
So we discussed, and then we discussed also with Ms. Giappone that during his third grade year, his fourth grade year, he's doing fairly well on his medications. Is that right?
Yes.
He had some incidents, but for the most part, he was functioning okay. Right. Okay. Did Linda talk to you about in elementary school that he, for the most of that time, was in what they call cluster classrooms, very small classrooms, low student-teacher ratio?
Yes.
Okay. Excuse me. You also indicated that you were told he was seeing a Dr. Kravitz when you started seeing him. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And did Linda tell you that she just stopped taking him to see Dr. Kravitz in May of 2008, 2 months before you started seeing him?
I don't know if I specifically knew that. Usually when I start with someone, I ask who's the current therapist, and she filled out a consent form for me to speak with him. It's not uncommon for kids to, in the summer, kind of take a break, and I started with him June, July.
Okay, so she never told you that she never went back to see Dr. Kravitz after May?
That's not in my notes specifically.
May I have a moment?
You may.
I don't have any more questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. You're excused.
Thank you.
Defense, call your next witness when you're ready. Sure. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a 10-minute recess. Please do not discuss the case among yourselves, and we'll be back with you shortly. Leave your notepads behind. Thank you.
So you got it. Okay.
And do you have an independent recollection of treating Mr. Cruz?
Very vaguely, of Mr. Cruz himself, as well as his mother, Linda Cruz. That's primarily based on the length of time it's been since I saw them. So most of my recollection is based on the medical chart records.
Okay, so you generally remember that he was your patient, but in terms of, if I were to ask you specific questions, you would have to refer to your notes.
Correct.
Okay. And may I have a moment, Judge? I'm going to show the state what's been marked as 1X for identification. May I approach the witness?
You may.
Showing you what has been marked as 1X for identification. Do you recognize those documents?
Yes.
Okay, what do you recognize it to be?
His medical chart.
Okay, so this is your file.
Correct. Yes.
Okay, and
Excuse me.
what's contained in this file?
His chart records from his office visits, billing records, any kind of communication in terms of letters. So pretty much anything that encompasses his treatment and evaluation.
Okay, and the medication prescriptions?
That's documented in his records. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And when do you document the visits with him or the medications?
Everything in terms of an office visit is done at the time of the visit.
The time of the visit?
Yeah.
Okay. And do these records then fairly and accurately depict the treatment that you gave to Nikolas Cruz?
Yes.
Okay, requesting that 1X be entered into evidence?
Does the state have an objection to defense 1X for identification?
No objection, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. Defense 1X for identification will be received without objection as defense 36.
Do you know how it was that Nikolas Cruz came to you for treatment?
I do not recall how he presented in terms of a referral or anything of that nature. I don't remember.
Okay, and when he came to you, did he already have a diagnosis?
Yes, his mother, Linda Cruz, indicated he had a several-year history of ADHD. She also indicated on his intake form that he had no history of any medical illnesses whatsoever, and that he was actively under the care of a local pediatrician.
Okay. And was he already taking medication when he came to you?
Yes, he was.
Do you remember what that was?
Yes, 2 medications, Focalin XR, 20 milligrams daily, and Risperdal, 0.25 milligrams daily.
And is there a form that you have new patients fill out?
Yes, there's an intake form that the legal guardian, in this case Linda Cruz, would have filled out.
Okay. And what did Linda indicate when you asked whether the student is an ESE student, if you recall?
Right. It was documented that he had an IEP, which is part of an ESE. That IEP stands for Individualized Education Plan. Yeah.
Okay. Did she provide you any information regarding the circumstances? Well, I'm sorry, let me back up. Did she tell you that he was adopted?
Yes.
Okay. And did she provide you with any information about the birth itself?
Yes, on the intake form there is a section about birth history.
Okay. And what did she tell you, if you remember?
Specifically, the way she answered the questions on the form. The questions verbatim are, was the length of pregnancy full term? She answered yes. She did describe it as a breech delivery. The weight of Mr. Cruz at birth was 6 pounds, 4 ounces. The questions, any complications while the child was in utero, including medication or drug exposure? She circled no. That is pretty much the questions that are asked about birth history. So.
Okay. And so you were not given any information about the birth parents?
No, there is a question also about family history and so forth, and she checked off that she didn't know anything about the birth parents in terms of family history.
Okay. And did you document in your notes the fact that you didn't receive any information about the birth family?
Yes, on the initial intake, in terms of my treatment plan and discussion of the potential diagnostics and understanding Mr. Cruz, I did make a notation that make it more difficult to analyze certain diagnoses in terms of risk factors, because a fair amount of psychiatric diagnoses, just like general medical issues, if you have a family history of some psychiatric diagnoses in your biological relatives, it does increase your risk of certain psychiatric conditions. So without that information, it's not as easy to diagnose at times.
Okay. And in that intake form, do you also ask about the child's meeting of milestones?
Yes, there is a section on that as well.
Okay, and what are milestones?
Milestones are related to development, so basically it relates to how on target a child is in meeting various developmental expectations, so things like speech, toilet training, motor walking, all these kinds of things that you would expect in normal development. So.
Okay, and do you recall what Mrs. Cruz told you about
Sure.
Nikolas meeting the milestones?
Right. She did check off, well, specifically, she did report a speech delay. She indicated that he had been in speech therapy through the 5th grade. Little unclear how she filled this out. It says speech at 4 years. I'm not sure, looking back now, if she meant that he started speaking at 4, or if he started speech therapy at 4 years old. It was actually my psychiatric evaluation. It says he started speech therapy at 4 years old, so it's a little different potentially. But clearly, he had speech therapy through the 5th grade. She documented that. She said he was toilet trained at 4 years, 3 months. She did report a history of social delays in terms of, as she words it, he had a hard time talking to kids and making friends. She did not put any problem with either fine motor skills or gross motor skills. Those were not checked off as being abnormal, as well as walking, anything of that nature. So.
Okay, and would 4 years and 3 months be a normal age for children to be toilet trained?
It would be delayed. Yeah.
Delayed?
Yeah.
Okay. Did she tell you anything about whether he was receiving therapeutic services?
What do you mean exactly?
Like if he was seeing a therapist, a psychologist, school counselor?
Right. At the time of the intake?
Or any time?
Oh, throughout the course of treatment, he did receive therapy services, yes.
Okay. And what other, if there were any concerns, did Linda relay to you when she first came to you?
Right. Her primary concerns were difficulty interacting with peers. That was probably one of her main concerns, along with behaviors, as she called it, which, some overlap there probably, as well as, I would say, irritability, just his emotional ability to maintain his emotions in general. So, yeah.
Okay.
And in addition to his diagnosis of ADHD, which he had been diagnosed for many years. So, yeah.
Okay. And did you make an initial diagnosis when you saw him?
Yes, I diagnosed him with ADHD combined type, which he had previously been diagnosed by his previous psychiatrist. I also diagnosed a disorder called disruptive behavior disorder, NOS, which stands for not otherwise specified. And then I also put a rule out, which means you're actually not diagnosing, but it's something you want to be, ruling out in terms of potentially diagnosing in the future, and you want to watch those symptoms, something called PDD-NOS, which stands for pervasive developmental disorder, not otherwise specified.
Okay. So I want to go back for a second. The disruptive, behavior disorder not otherwise specified. When you say not otherwise specified, what does that mean?
So when we diagnose mental health conditions in psychiatry, we utilize a manual called the DSM, which stands for Diagnostic and Statistical Manuals. There's approximately 300 mental health conditions in that manual. Most of them actually have very specific criteria to meet, to be diagnosed with those conditions. Oftentimes, if within a group of disorders, such as behavior disorders, if you don't meet the criteria for any of those specific behavior disorders, most categories have what they call a not otherwise specified category, which means a child may have some symptoms of those categories or disorders, but they don't meet the full criteria. So that would be, in that case. the diagnosis.
Okay. And you said that one of them was to rule out PDD, which you said was pervasive developmental disorder?
Correct.
Okay. And what about him made you think that that was something you needed to keep on your radar?
A few of the symptoms that we just described, so difficulty with peer interactions, relates to social skills. So PDD, just to clarify, pervasive developmental disorder, they're essentially in the DSM-4, which actually was in effect when he presented in 2012. That was the last year the DSM-4 criteria and diagnoses actually took place, but that's when he presented for this evaluation. So at that time, there's actually 3 PDD, pervasive developmental disorders you could diagnose somebody with. At that time, there was Asperger's disorder, autism disorder, and the PDD-NOS, that I said rule out PDD-NOS category. So the symptoms he presented with, in terms of wanting to rule that out, were, again, the peer relationships, that he was having difficulty talking with friends, as his mother alluded to. His behaviors in general can be a manifestation of social skills at times, so his difficulty with irritability and so forth can be indicative of that. There were some things on his exam, specifically, such as not appropriate eye contact, which is a nonverbal social skill that on exam you were able to observe in a client if they have some possible social skills. Those would generally be the things that you would look for. Yeah.
Okay. And so did you feel that for a child his age, he was delayed in those, or there was an issue in those? He wasn't exhibiting, and from what you understood, wasn't displaying at school or at home the social skills that a child of his age should be?
Correct. The social skills as a whole were impaired compared to what you would expect. But on the other hand, not meeting criteria, again, to be diagnosed with any of those conditions at that time. So, yeah.
Okay. And did you take any action at the first visit?
Yeah. And just one other key symptom that I failed to mention was the speech delay. Speech delay is a significant part of PDD also. But that being said, if you actually have a speech delay, you cannot be diagnosed technically with Asperger's disorder. So out of those 3 disorders, again, one was automatically discarded, because if you have a speech delay, you cannot be diagnosed with Asperger's disorder. So basically it boils down to a PDD-NOS versus autism. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so at the first visit, did you make a medication change?
His ADHD medicine, again, which was previously prescribed by his other psychiatrist, was maintained at the same dose, 20 milligrams. The Risperdal was slightly increased to the next dose up, which was 0.5 milligrams.
Okay, and why did you increase his Risperdal?
Due to the concerns, particularly expressed by his mother at that time, of ongoing defiant behaviors, irritability. That's the type of medication that we use for those types of symptoms that he was still exhibiting at times, particularly in the home setting she described. Yeah.
Okay. And when you see, when Mr. Cruz would come to you for visits, would you do a brief mental status exam?
Yes.
Okay. And you document that on your notes, is that right?
Sure.
Okay. And where does the information for that come from? Is it your observations, or is it the patient's report, or both?
Both. It depends on the part of the mental status exam specifically.
Okay. What about delusions or hallucinations?
So those would be both, actually. Well, they're different, but so these are symptoms. Let me make it clear that a delusion or a hallucination, like an auditory hallucination, is not a diagnosis. That's simply a symptom. Okay, so to be diagnosed with a disorder, you have to have multiple symptoms. Otherwise, anybody who has a hallucination would be diagnosed with a mental health disorder. And many conditions, both medical and psychiatric, can cause hallucinations as well as delusions. So delusions in particular are not something that you normally would specifically ask a client. It's going to be very low yield if you ask a client, are you delusional, or are you having delusional thoughts? It's not going to be a very high yield answer or effective. The other thing is an outpatient office. Realistically, if you ask every client every time they come in, are you delusional, the therapeutic bond is not going to last very long. So that's not something you typically ask somebody directly. It is something that usually comes out in a narrative in terms of, the discussions you're having. If somebody is delusional or has delusional thoughts. And the nice thing about child and adolescent psychiatry, you normally have the parent there who, if there was a delusion, for example, they would generally be able to express their child has been exhibiting these delusional thoughts at home, and they're able to tell you that history. As far as hallucinations, that's a little bit of both. I mean, when you document, as I did, that somebody's not having hallucinations, that's usually twofold. I mean, usually you would ask them if they're having auditory or visual hallucinations, not in that way, but certainly are you hearing any voices or seeing any things that aren't there, that type of thing. But of importance also is the thought process, which is also documented on every one of his visits. That is something that you observe in a client. So there are some clients you may ask, are you hearing voices? They may say no, okay? But there are mental health diagnoses that if they're hearing voices, it's actually fairly visible. What we call it responding to internal stimuli. So essentially it's somebody who might be having a conversation with themselves. You might be walking on the street, you see somebody having a very loud conversation with themselves. Doesn't necessarily mean they're having auditory hallucinations, but it is highly suspicious, and you would obviously want to elaborate further in terms of other symptoms to see if that's part of an overall diagnosis. So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And throughout your treatment of Nikolas Cruz, you didn't have any concerns about that, right? Delusions, hallucinations, hearing voices, that was not a concern.
Correct. On all those fronts I just mentioned, those were never ascertained or, yeah.
Okay, and you ask about, or you, one of the factors is insight or judgment. Okay, can you explain what that is?
Insight is a term that's used in psychiatry to generally describe an understanding or awareness of one's diagnosis, treatment, just a general understanding of what's going on, so to speak. That's what the word insight means on a mental status exam in psychiatry. Judgment is actually pretty much how it sounds. It's the ability to make good decisions on the outside. So is the person using good judgment essentially when they're not seeing you on the outside and coming back? You have to evaluate that. So, yeah.
Okay, and in your visits with him, how did you document that for Nikolas?
Generally, it varied from fair to poor on most of the visits. Yeah.
Okay.
So let me just clarify that. So usually in our mental status exams, there's a three options essentially on the standard. So usually it's either good, fair, or poor. Yeah.
Okay. And eye contact, how did you document that?
So I did document that as being fair, which, so the significance of that again is it wasn't poor, but it wasn't good. So yeah.
Okay, and is that another, that you said was a social skill issue probably?
It can be, it doesn't have to be, but it can be a symptom of social skills delay, yes.
Okay, and you had a visit with him in April of 2012, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, and did you make any changes or did anything happen that you documented at that visit?
His mother did convey they stopped taking the Risperdal, which had been increased at the last appointment. So they had done that prior to his visit with me, as she didn't feel it was being effective in terms of his target symptoms, in terms of the behaviors, essentially.
Okay, so Linda told you she made a decision to have him stop taking Risperdal.
Again, I have no recollection whatsoever what she said, but that's essentially what my notes are saying, yes.
Okay, if you had determined that he should no longer take that, would you have documented that in your notes? If that was your determination?
Yes, it doesn't, it clearly says in my note, stop taking, I didn't stop it at that appointment, so yes.
Okay, and in fact you said you had increased his dosage of that.
The previous appointment, yeah.
Okay, but she reported to you that she didn't think it was having any effect on him. Is that right?
Well, I didn't say that. I said she didn't think, I used the word efficacious, which basically means it's not as effective as it should be. So.
Okay, and did she also tell you that, I'm sorry, let's back up. This was at the end of 2012, right? Like the spring of 2012?
That second appointment,
Yes.
April 2012.
Okay, and so near the end of the school year?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
And did she tell you that he received 4 behavioral referrals in that last 3 weeks of school?
No, she did not.
Okay. You added a medication at that visit, correct?
Okay, yes, the April 2012 or something. Yeah.
Okay, what
Yeah.
medication was that?
Clonidine.
And what is that?
That's a medicine that we use for ADHD symptoms, particularly in the evening hours, because the basic premise is ADHD is a 24-hour type of diagnosis. It doesn't disappear when you go to sleep. So the problem is you can't give stimulants like Parkland when kids go to sleep, otherwise it's going to worsen their sleep problem. So we have limited medicines that are good for the hyperactivity and fidgetiness that kids exhibit when they go to sleep, and they have more sleep problems if you don't address it. So clonidine is a common medicine that's prescribed to help with that hyperactivity, the impulsiveness of ADHD, but also allow a child to sleep better. So.
Okay. And then you saw him again in the summer, in June of 2012, right?
Yes.
Okay. And did either Nicholas or Linda tell you anything that you felt should be noted?
He did, Nicholas himself, express that he thought the Parkland was continued to be helpful for his ability to maintain his focus. His mother did say he was still struggling with some of his academics. He did handle, in terms of tolerability, the clonidine well. There were no side effects from the medicine that we added the previous appointment. Yeah.
Okay. And at some point, were you asked to write a letter on behalf of Nikolas Cruz regarding treatment?
I know I did a couple letters, so I'm not sure which one you were specifically.
Okay. On September 24th of 2013, did you write a letter?
Correct.
Okay, and what did you write in that letter?
Right. I said this letter is to support Nicholas being placed in a therapeutic residential setting.
Okay. Do you recall who asked you to do that?
I don't recall, but there's realistically only one person who could ask me to do that, a legal guardian, and that was Linda Cruz. Nobody else can actually ask you to get involved in medical care, which is part of his medical care. So a residential setting is a voluntary process, unlike a Baker Act, which is an involuntary process. So a Baker Act, the parent has absolutely no choice. If I felt somebody meets Baker Act criteria, I fill out the form, they're hospitalized. A residential placement is just the opposite. It's actually a voluntary process where typically a parent is given instructions by these facilities. You need to get a letter from a psychiatrist as part of the application process for us to evaluate his admission criteria. Yeah.
Okay. And knowing that you don't spend, every day with him, and would you have written that letter if you believed that was completely inappropriate for him?
No.
Okay. Now, at some point you learned, I think this is in the spring of 2014, that he was going to a different school. Is that right?
I'm sorry, what was the date?
April of 2014?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. You learned he was attending Cross Creek now?
Correct.
Are you familiar with that school?
I have some familiarity with it.
Okay. What kind of school is it? Whatever you know about it.
It is a school that often children who have difficulty maintaining themselves in a general public school setting, could be behavioral in particular, are sent to for more structure and accommodations and so forth.
Okay. Did Linda ever tell you that Nicholas had gone to a neurologist?
No, she did not.
Okay. If she had told you that, would you have documented that?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you saw him in April of 2014. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. And did you note anything at that visit?
What you had just mentioned, that he was now attending Cross Creek, so that was documented to allow better supervision of his behavior and provide appropriate accommodations. He also, the clonidine, he was continuing to take the evening dose, but he was also taking a half a tablet in the morning of that medication, in addition to the Parkland, which he was still on the same dosage. So.
Okay, and did he express to you wanting to leave Cross Creek?
At that appointment, in August of 2014, that was documented that he expressed an interest in going back to Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School at that appointment in August 2014.
Okay, and did you ever find out whether he did go to Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School?
I do know during the course of treatment he did return to that school, yes.
Okay. Now, you had a visit with him when he was full-time at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas in February of 2016, is that right?
Yes.
And did he tell you anything about how he was doing at that time?
He was expressing some concern with his difficulty focusing, particularly the ADHD symptoms. In between the visits we just skipped, he had actually been transitioned to a different formulation of the Parkland for cost purposes, put on a generic and a little bit different, it's called a short-acting, which is not extended release, but it's basically the same medicine otherwise, but he did express difficulty focusing in his academics at that time.
Okay, so he had switched to the generic version of Parkland, you said?
Generic and a short-acting. So short-acting means you generally take the medicine twice a day instead of once a day.
Okay. Do you know whether he was getting it twice a day?
That's how the prescription was written. I don't recall. It's possible the school was, typically the schools administer the second dose and asked me to fill out a form essentially to do that. So.
Okay. So did you increase his medication at that visit?
Correct. His ADHD medicine was increased at that appointment, yes.
Okay. Now, in November of 2016, you saw him. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And did Linda express any concerns to you on that day?
Yeah. She expressed that he had had some physical altercations with peers at the school and had some defiant behaviors in general. So that was her big concern at that appointment.
Okay. And did you document your impression of Nikolas on that day?
I did. I said in terms of how he appeared, I said he appeared remorseful at that time, and he did express verbally the importance of not engaging in such behaviors.
Okay, so, and when you say the importance of not engaging in such the behaviors that Linda expressed to you she was concerned about, fighting at school and defiant behaviors, is that what you're saying?
In terms of what he said?
Yes. What he was remorseful about?
Based on the chart, it's behaviors. I certainly don't recall what he said specifically.
Okay. Did he tell you anything about not wanting to go back to Cross Creek?
Yes. Both his mother and Nikolas both expressed that they were trying to do everything they could in terms of maximizing his ability to function better so he wouldn't have to return to Cross Creek.
Okay. Did you alter your diagnosis at that visit?
Again, 2012, when he first presented, was a DSM-4. That was the last year the DSM-4 was in effect. Starting in 2013, the DSM-5 came out. The terminology on some disorders, including that particular disorder that we talked about to start with, the disruptive behavior disorder, they changed the terminology, but it's the exact equivalency as far as coding and everything. So the term is different, but it's actually the same exact disorder, essentially. So it's yeah.
So it's just the manual change?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Now, and again, that was in November of 2016, right?
Correct.
Okay. And he doesn't come back to you until when?
August 2017.
Okay, so nearly 10 months later.
Between those two appointments, yeah.
Okay, and did you find out whether he was taking his medication?
They indicated when he came back at that August that he was not taking his medicine.
Okay, and is he at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas anymore?
No, they came back because he was going to be attending a learning center from noon until 5 p.m. And that was actually why they came back at that last visit, because they were concerned about his ability to focus at that learning center for academic purposes.
Okay, and was he working?
Yes, he was working at the dollar store.
Okay, and did you convey anything to them regarding the time, the 10 months that he let go by before he came back to you?
Well, in general, at that office visit, I documented that I informed Nikolas and his mother of the importance of compliance with attending appointments, specifically not seen since November of last year. I also conveyed to Nikolas and his mother the importance of going to Henderson Mental Health, where he had been receiving therapy services as part of his treatment plan. I also recommended I offered the protocol at my office is an appointment is offered at the time they are there. They did not schedule an appointment, but they indicated they would contact my office for a follow-up appointment. Yeah, so that was the...
Okay, so you tried to get them to make another appointment, yes?
Correct.
Okay, and you told them that they could call you if they have any problems or questions?
Right, I said I informed them to contact me with any questions or concerns.
Okay, and did they ever call you after that?
I never heard from them after that August appointment.
Okay. May I have a moment, Judge?
You may.
Did it seem to you that Linda was really trying the best she could to get Nikolas the help he needed?
Yes.
Okay. I don't have any more questions.
Okay, cross-examination.
Yes. Good morning, Dr. Hagan. You indicated that you were board certified. You had 2 board certifications, correct?
Correct.
So going back, I want to go through some of your qualifications again. So you went to medical school, and then after that, you had a residency?
Correct. I attended Emory School of Medicine for my general psychiatry training.
And how long is that?
It's actually normally 4 years, but if you choose to do a child fellowship, child and adolescent subspecialty training, they allow you to do 3 years, and then your 4th year is part of your first year in child, and then you do another year in child. So for me, it was 3 years of adult training plus 2 years of child training.
Okay, so you had 4 years medical school, and then 5 years in total residency fellowship?
Correct.
Okay, and then, so at this point, you're doing you're trained in adult psychiatry and child and adolescent psychology?
Psychiatry, correct.
I'm sorry, psychiatry. And,
Yep.
and that's a big difference, and I'm sorry for saying that, psychiatry, because psychologists do not go to medical school.
Correct.
Okay, I apologize for that. So, what exactly is board certification mean?
Board certification is a process every specialty has an organization that certifies physicians in their specialty. So for psychiatrists, the organization it's called the American Board of Psychiatry and Neurology. So they certify psychiatrists as well as neurologists. So there's a process of mostly exam taking, both a written exam as well as they also have a separate exam where you have to fly around the country actually and evaluate patients face to face and are graded on that and basically evaluated, and if you pass, you end up, along with the written exam, you essentially get board certified. If you don't pass those tests, you don't get board certified.
Okay, and then you have to be licensed in the state?
Yes.
And you're licensed in Florida, I take it?
Correct.
Anywhere else?
No, in the past, when I was working in Georgia, I had a Georgia license, but since I haven't worked there in many years, that's not active.
And have you had to go through a recertification for your boards?
Yes.
And what's that process?
That consists of, well, it's changed, but when I recertified my boards, that again consisted of an exam of both specialties. To maintain that certification in both adult and child and adolescent, you have to take an exam in both of those again. So that's expected every 10 years to maintain that board certification. If you don't pass those exams, you don't maintain your board certification.
And you went through that recertification process?
Correct.
Right. And so what are your areas of expertise that you hold yourself out, that you have a special expertise on?
Well, overall, child and adolescent, that's why the fellowship is a very specific training in just seeing children and adolescents. So I would say my expertise overall is child and adolescent psychiatry.
Would that include treating ADHD?
Yes.
And would that include treating things such as depression?
I would say it includes anything in the DSM-4 that's a DSM-4 and DSM that is a child and adolescent diagnosis, which most disorders can, but certainly ones that are slanted towards being diagnosed in children. So
Okay.
in the DSM-4, they specifically actually had the section of children disorders commonly found in children and adolescents. They changed that in DSM-5. Now they just put it all together, but there's certain disorders like ADHD that are still more commonly diagnosed in children.
Including, and I know you said includes it, but I just want to be clear because we've talked about certain things here. Autism, you're an expert in treatment of that.
Sure, the most common average age of diagnosis of autism is approximately age 3 to 4, so that is diagnosed by child and adolescent psychiatrists, yes.
And actually expert in diagnosing and treating, correct?
Correct.
All right. And anxiety, panic disorders, those would all be included in what you can diagnose and treat, correct?
Yes.
In when you first began treating the defendant in January of 2012, so he would have been in 6th grade, 13 years old?
Yes, he was in the 6th grade.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Yes, he was in the 6th grade.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you. And I'm not sure if these were things that were told to you specifically or things that you gathered from your when speaking with him, but you determined, and the mother as well, that there was no history of alcohol or illicit drug use for the defendant, correct?
I'm sorry.
There was no history of illicit drug use or alcohol?
By Mr. Cruz himself?
Yes.
Yes, no.
Okay, and that stayed consistent through the years that you treated him all the way to August of 17, and so he was just short of his 19th birthday at that point.
Correct. I was not aware of any alcohol or drug use.
Okay. At your initial examination, he was alert and pleasant?
From what the documents show, and from what I recall, there were no issues at all with
Okay.
Mr. Cruz.
And you documented that his mood was good and a full range of affect?
At that initial appointment, yes.
Can you explain to the jury what affect is and what a full range means?
Sure. Yeah, so an affect is basically how you present yourself in terms of expressing your emotions. So a full range affect means your ability to express your emotions in a full, from a range of emotions that are appropriate to the situation. Certain disorders, you could have what's called a constricted affect, which means an inability to express your emotions well, which are more common in things like mood disorders. But an affect is your ability to regulate your emotions according to the situation appropriately. So in terms of how you express yourself to somebody else in terms of your facial appearance and so forth. So your ability to, for somebody to observe how you're feeling. So if you're happy, it would be different than if you're sad. So the ability to regulate that in terms of how you're observed by somebody else.
And is a full range of affect a normal condition then?
Correct. That's what we that's the goal of treatment, yes.
And that's what you found him at the initial examination?
Correct.
And no delusions or hallucinations were noted in your record for the initial examination, correct?
Correct, yeah.
And throughout the next 5.5 years of examinations, it continued. You never noted any delusions or hallucinations, did you?
Correct.
And you note also that his thought process is linear. So could you explain what that means, Doctor?
Sure. So sort of what I briefly alluded to before. So his thought process is your ability to think clearly in terms of how you express your thoughts. Various terms we use within that. So goal-oriented means goal-directed, means you're able to express to somebody what your intentions are appropriately, what your goals are appropriately. There are various things that if your thought process is not linear, it can, for example, you could be going off on tangents. You could have difficulty expressing yourself. If you ask somebody a question and they don't respond for quite a while, that can be considered something called thought blocking, which can be indicative of certain disorders. So the ability to have a linear thought process basically maintains your expressing to somebody else. Your thoughts are clear, concise, and goal-oriented.
I don't mean to dumb it down to a lay perspective, but would this mean, I guess I am trying to, would this mean that there would be a beginning, a middle, and an end to a thought that made sense to you?
Well, that's what linear, again, linear, the thoughts are going hand in hand with each other versus there's various terms. Again, you can go off in tangents. Flight of ideas means you go off on various topics, and sometimes you come back to the original topic, sometimes you don't. That's not a linear thought process.
And throughout your visits with him those 5.5 years, did you note that his thought process remained linear?
Correct, yes.
Right. You were asked on direct on April 25th of 2012 that Linda Cruz had stopped Risperdal. It appears on that you did not restart Risperdal at the end of that visit, correct?
That is true, yes.
Okay. Does that mean that you were okay with her stopping it, or that you considered her opinion on this matter?
Again, I don't recall the dialogue. It could mean a variety of things. I will add that that's the appointment I did add the clonidine. Clonidine, although I talked about how it helps the ADHD symptoms at night, it does have some, and he was taking the Risperdal at night, so basically that was replacing the Risperdal, essentially. Clonidine is a different category of medicines, but it does have some features in terms of addressing not only the ADHD symptoms that I was talking about before, but some of the impulse control and irritability that Risperdal does as well.
Have you found that attentive parents can sometimes attentive and experienced parents with psychiatry through their own children get to become knowledgeable about the medications that their children are taking? Not that they're reaching your level, but...
It's variable, so I don't have an opinion on that.
You were asked about the letter that you had sent in September 24th, 2013, supporting a therapeutic residential setting. You recall that letter? You probably have it in front of you? Or?
Yes.
Okay. When it's appropriate Do you on occasions help to support the application process of a patient if they're seeking greater services for their child?
Can you clarify what you mean specifically?
Okay. If one of your parents or patients, but I'm talking about children here, so like you said, it would have to be a parent that would be asking you. If they're seeking a letter of support to get greater services, perhaps in the school or elsewhere, is it unusual for you to support that application process by writing a letter?
No, it's not unusual, but that would obviously be dependent on what service specifically that letter was specifically for a specific service. So it depends a little bit on what the service is. There's various services that people seek, so that would just vary. So.
Obviously, you wouldn't send a letter if you didn't think it was appropriate, correct?
Correct. I mean, I wouldn't do a letter for somebody if I didn't think it was supportive of what they were, if I didn't think it was indicated, essentially.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you have no specific knowledge of what exactly that letter was going to be used for, or if it was used at all?
Well, it was, as the letter indicates, it was supposed to be used for therapeutic residential placement. So that was what the letter was intended to be used for.
Doctor, you were shown a letter purportedly written, I would say you were shown at deposition a letter, if you recall, that was purportedly written by Dr. Ortiz and a Rona O'Connor Kelly, June 5th, 2014. Do you recall seeing that letter?
At the deposition, I had never seen it before the deposition.
Right. While she's doing that, move on. I'll get back to that in just a second. The visits, if I can go back to June 18th of 12, I just want to go through some of your findings. Again, in June of 2012, his thought process remained linear, no delusions or hallucinations, no abnormal movements, and full range of affect. Is that correct?
Yes.
What is the significance of no abnormal movements?
That's documented for different reasons in mental health. It can be documented. Some medicines in our field, for instance, cause abnormal movements as far as side effects, so that would be one reason. And there's other reasons as well. Many children with autism spectrum disorders have what's called stereotypic movements, which are repetitive movements that are not functional, meaning like, they could rock back and forth like this. That's a repetitive stereotypic movement that you would see in a child that has autism spectrum sometimes. You might have seen children who flap their hands, for example. That's something called self-stimming, which is a common coping skill that children in the autism spectrum do. So there's a variety of reasons why that would be mentioned in a mental status exam.
And is there any indication in the record of seeing those movements on Mr. Cruz?
No.
Okay. Is that Mark now?
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Names are all clear. Okay. 1 minute.
No problem.
Does the defense have any objection to the court receiving what will be marked for identification as states 24J?
May I just see it for a moment?
Sure.
I'm just using it. I'm not moving it.
Oh, you're not moving it. You just want it marked. So it's 24J.
So I may approach the witness.
You
Your
may.
Honor. Showing you State's Exhibit 24J for identification. Can you just look at that, please?
Sure.
Is that the letter that was shown to you at deposition?
I believe it is. I don't know this detail. I don't remember the details of the letter specifically, but I believe it's signed by the same people, and I presume that's the same letter. Yes.
It's a letter addressed to you, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And have you ever seen that letter?
Other than at the deposition.
Other than deposition?
No.
Nothing during the time that Mr. Cruz was your patient? You didn't see it or consider it? It had no, you have no opinion about that letter? Is that correct?
As far as the letter itself or the inability for me to see that letter?
Well, you didn't see the letter, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Please answer yes or no.
Yes.
Okay. You did not see the letter,
Correct. Yep.
And it had no influence on your therapy that you gave to the defendant, correct?
Correct. I never saw the letter, so
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you. If I can go to August 29th of 2012, another visit with Mr. Cruz, or Mr. Cruz visiting you. Did you note at that time that he had a good appetite and good sleep patterns?
Yes, that was documented.
And are those things important to you as symptoms that don't exist? Is that important to you?
There's a variety of reasons, again, that so these are symptoms that could be part of diagnoses. They could be part of side effects, in particular with medicine that Mr. Cruz was taking, like ADHD medicine has side effects. Those are two of the more common side effects of ADHD medicines, affecting sleep and appetite, for example. That's why also it would be commonly documented that appetite and sleep are good when somebody's taking an ADHD medicine.
Okay, so if you get a good report to sleep and appetite, you know, at least for those purposes, you don't have to change medications.
Well, if they're having other side effects, I mean, but as far
Just
as...
for those.
Okay. Of course, if those are doing well, then that's not a concern. Yep.
Okay, and his mood was good and still full range of affect, thought process linear, no delusions or hallucinations remain, correct?
Correct, yep.
Okay.
Yes.
And on December 4th, 2012, the same report as August 29th, in terms of mood stable, no delusions or hallucinations, full range effect, no abnormal movement, sleep and appetite are stable?
Correct.
Okay. March 5th of 2013, did it continue with mood was good, sleep and appetite pattern stable, no abnormal movements?
Yes, correct.
Now, attending Cross Creek, you note that first on April 1st, 2014, correct?
Yes.
And that's the school for emotional behavioral problems?
Correct.
Okay. And at that time, you still noted mood was good, thought process linear, and no delusions or hallucinations?
Correct.
Okay. Now, August 25th, 2014, is it true that your notes indicate that he's at Cross Creek, but he expresses his interest to go to Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, correct?
Yes, that's what's documented.
And is it also in your records that he appears to have good motivation?
That's what I documented, yes.
Okay. Is motivation a good thing for your patients to have?
Absolutely. As long as
Okay.
it's a motivation that's well-directed, yes.
And, of course, as long as it's pro-social as opposed to antisocial, correct? And good behaviors and...
As long as it has good intentions overall, yes.
Okay. So let's assume in good motivations then. why is that a good thing for your patient to have a good motivation, specifically Mr. Cruz?
I mean, as you mentioned, any patient, you want them to be motivated to make changes of improvement. That's the goal of treatment in general. So again, motivation to obtain something that's a good thing for them as well as attainable, obviously, motivations that are, achievable and things like that. So, the record clearly states he was motivated. It doesn't really elaborate further on that. So.
Okay, so in your notes, in your records, it does indicate that he eventually does go to Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, back to that school, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Were you aware of the partial mainstreaming process? Excuse me. Just clear my throat. I think I'm okay now. Thank you. The partial mainstreaming process, the ESE process that he had to go through to be partially mainstreamed to Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. Were you aware of that?
In Mr. Cruz's specific case?
Yes.
I don't recall that.
Okay. And so I assume then you wouldn't be familiar, at least right now, or recall that once he was in the partial mainstreaming process, that he then got to the full mainstreaming process so that he was actually mainstreamed back to Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. You're not aware of that?
I don't recall those details.
Okay. But you just know that he was at Cross Creek and he ended up at MSD?
Correct. Okay.
And then you're also aware through your notes that he was having problems at MSD?
I'm not. What do you mean by problems?
Okay, well, that they wanted to, and I'll direct you to the note. On November 3rd of 16, there was discussions of him having to go back to Cross Creek due to behaviors that he was demonstrating.
Correct.
Do you recall that?
Yeah, that's documented.
Yes, okay. But before that happened in November of 16, you still saw him December of 14 and August 20th of 15, correct? And February 22nd of 16.
Yes,
correct? Okay.
Correct. Yeah.
And through those sessions, or I'm not sure what the word is that you would describe.
Appointments.
Appointments, thank you. I couldn't think of the word, thank you. That his thought process remained linear, mood was good, no delusions or hallucinations, no abnormal movements, full range effect. Those all stayed intact, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And even at the time that he was having problems at MSD, and there was talk of him going back to Cross Creek, which was reported to you, his effect still was full range, his mood was good, no abnormal movements or tics, sleep and appetite patterns remained stable. I'm referring to November 3rd of 16. Correct?
Yes.
And even up till August 14th of 2017, at this time, is it noted in your records that he's now in a local learning center? He's no longer at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School?
Correct.
Okay, and so this is about 6 months, or exactly 6 months before the shooting. This is August 14th, 2017, and the shootings being February 14th, 2018.
Correct.
Okay. And did you note in your records that he had no problems working as a cashier at Dollar Tree? Or he reported that to you?
I can see.
And this
Right,
is,
right. I mean, he expressed that he didn't have any problems working in that capacity.
Okay. Full range of affect as well?
Yes.
Mood was good?
Yes.
Appropriate eye contact?
Yes.
What does that mean to you at this point what does that mean?
Right. Well, that signifies your ability to, when you're looking at somebody, to maintain eye contact appropriately, in contrast to some appointments that were previously noted where he was noted to have fair eye contact.
Okay. Thought process was linear,
Yes.
so he's still going from A to B to C, correct?
Yes.
And no delusions or hallucinations are noted by you?
Correct.
And you are, of course, unaware that at this time he's already considering being a mass shooter. You're not aware of that, are you?
No, I'm not.
Okay, nothing about your mental status exam, your appointment with him would have given you the knowledge that he was already exploring being a mass shooter, correct?
There's nothing in the record that would signify that whatsoever.
No abnormal movements or tics, and then appropriate sleep and appetite patterns at that time?
Correct.
Now, for each session, his mother was present, correct?
Yes.
You never diagnosed him with autism, did you?
No.
Based on the records or your recollections, was the defendant and his mother receptive to your treatments?
Yes.
All right, thank you very much, Doctor. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Is there anything else, Ms. Curtis?
Yes.
Can I have just a moment, Judge?
You may.
Oh, I'm sorry. Dr. Negan, how long did your visits with Nikolas usually last?
On average, I can't say specifically. I mean, I certainly don't recall, but it would be a typical office follow-up. So I would say approximately 15 minutes. They were coded as far as billing code, which also has a time frame generally, which is up to 20 minutes usually. So in that range.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you weren't spending hours with him at a time?
No, that's.
Okay. Now, Mr. Marcus asked you about whether sometimes parents, because they have children who take medication and they've spent a lot of time, that they sometimes will make medication decisions, or that they feel they have the ability to make medication decisions. Do you remember that?
He made the comment, yes.
Okay. Now, in your practice, especially when your patients are children, you rely heavily on feedback from the parents. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. But in your practice, would you prefer that you make the medication decisions based on what you're told as opposed to the parents making the medication decisions?
Well, of course, and when I discuss in his record as far as compliance and so forth, that's sort of what that's suggesting, yes.
Okay. And in terms of relying on the feedback from the parents. Did Mrs. Cruz tell you that while Nikolas was at West Glades Middle School, he received 77 disciplinary referrals?
No.
Okay. And you, we're talking about your diagnoses of him. Initially, it was disruptive behavior disorder from the DSM-4, right?
Yes.
And then disruptive impulse control, it was called, I guess, not otherwise specified
Right.
when it changed.
Yes.
Okay. And is that diagnosis, would that qualify as a basis for a later diagnosis of antisocial personality disorder as an adult?
I'm not sure exactly how you're phrasing that.
Okay, so if you just diagnosed an adolescent with disruptive behavior disorder not otherwise specified or disruptive impulse control disorder, would that, in your experience, be a sufficient basis to diagnose as an adult antisocial personality disorder?
To be diagnosed with antisocial personality, you have to have the symptoms. Again, just like any disorder, there is a criteria on antisocial personality disorder that you have to have symptoms of conduct disorder before age 15. That's really the only criteria to, otherwise anybody could be diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder at any time in their adult lives, as long as they have that criteria met, that you had some symptomatology of conduct disorder, not necessarily meaning the diagnosis, but having some symptoms before age 15.
Okay. And may I just have a moment?
You may.
If the state doesn't object, Judge, I would also, you were shown a letter, I'm sorry, a letter that you said you did not recognize, right, that was written to you?
Correct.
Okay. And with a certification of business records, Judge, I would ask that this be entered into evidence. It's marked now as defense for why it was previously marked as a state exhibit. Is there an objection?
It has got a business record, so it's admissible.
Okay, without objection, defense 4Y will be received as defense 37. You can just give it to the board, please.
May I have a moment?
You may.
So you said a moment ago that you were not aware of all of the disciplinary referrals at West Glades Middle School, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And if you had been made aware of those, you may have considered at the time a different regimen of medication for his behaviors.
I can't render an opinion on that. I wasn't aware of it, so I can't say what hypothetically I would have done or not done.
Okay. And it's not in your notes, so that means Mrs. Cruz didn't tell you about it, correct?
Tell me about what?
The behavioral problems he was having at West Glades Middle School.
I mean, again, the record does demonstrate that he had behavior problems, not the 77 referrals or something of that nature that you mentioned.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you said you did not ever receive a letter that was written, you are not, nobody communicated with you from West Glades Middle School about his behavioral problems?
From West Glades themselves?
Yes.
No.
Okay. And permission to publish the letter.
Okay.
And you testified that you were not aware of any of these.
Lower.
Low.
See the top.
Oh,
A little further.
hold on. I'm going to just try to make it.
You gotta make it small.
Okay, so
That's the same letter I'm assuming you're showing me?
this is the letter that you were shown earlier that you
Right.
said you didn't receive, but was written to you. Right. Okay, and so it indicates that he is now at Cross Creek. Is that correct?
That's what it says there, yeah.
Okay, and it's basically an expression of concern from his treatment providers, his therapy, his school counselor, about his behaviors.
I'm going to object to, this is leading, the letter can speak for itself.
Sustained.
Right, I'll just let the.
You know, I've been asked about the letter several times. I can elaborate a little bit. As far as, I think the state asked me a little bit about my knowledge of Cross Creek. I can say that there's not too many child psychiatrists in all of Broward County, so most of the schools who have difficulties with students, they do get in touch with me, okay, one way or the other. One of the most common things that Cross Creek specifically has done over the years is these staff members, so to speak, they accompany clients to my office with concerns, okay? So I have staff members at Cross Creek come with the parent, come with the student, and express concerns.
Okay, but did that happen?
This did not happen one time with Mr. Cruz.
Okay. I'm going to just show the second part of the letter. Yeah.
And a few other things about the letter. The date on the letter, I can't see it. I think it was June something.
I'm sorry. June 5th of 2014.
Right. Okay. So obviously the content of the letter is pretty significant concerns. That's why I've been shown the letter several times. If you look at the medical record, his next appointment with me after April 1st was August 25th. Okay. If you have a level of concern, okay, you either get a client in with their outpatient psychiatrist, you either get a patient hospitalized, you do something.
Okay.
This is 3 months after he presented, this letter was written with no knowledge by his psychiatrist. It's not something you wait 3 months for to get seen. That's not conducive to communicating a letter of this nature. So,
Okay,
yeah.
thank you. I don't have any more questions.
Okay, thank you, sir. You're
Thank you.
excused.
Thank you.
Have a nice day.
Yep.
Defense, call your next witness.
Yes, that's it for today.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to excuse you until Monday morning at 9 o'clock. Before you leave, I need to remind you that during recesses, you may not discuss the case with anyone nor permit anyone to say anything to you or in your presence about the case. This includes even your family members and close friends. If someone tries to discuss the case with you, any person whatsoever, tell the person to stop and report the matter immediately. Do not discuss the case among one another or with anyone else, or ask for advice by any means, including posting on an internet website, chat room, or doing any research on the computer or other electronic device. Thank you all very much for your time and attention. Please leave your notepads behind. Yes, sir.
Does the schedule for September still hold true, or is there anything that may have changed?
There might be a few adjustments, but as far as that 1 week, some of the lawyers have a mandatory training that they have to go to. So that week of September, and then let me look. The Monday is Memorial Day, Labor Day, excuse me, and then so that whole week is. The week of the 5th is Labor Day, and you're going to have that entire week off. The rest of the month is a full month. There may be some slight modifications depending on how it goes, but pretty much, yes, this is 90% accurate. I won't tell you you have to be here on a day where I've already told you you have off, meaning that full week. I might say come later on one of these days, or make it a half day, or something to that effect, but you can plan on not being here from the 5th through the 9th, okay? All right, yes, ma'am.
Letters for work, can we get those in emails or?
Yes, thank you for reminding me. That's not a problem at all. I will prepare those. If you can wait a few minutes, I can do it now, or I can give it to you all on Monday, or I can email it to you.
Whatever works for you.
Okay, no problem. I'll do them right now. All right, thank you. Okay, the jurors have been excused, and the court is in recess until Monday at,
Your Honor?
yes?
I have one last thing I would ask the court.
Okay,
There was an agreed stipulation on the neuroimaging tools and on the MRI. Actually, an agreed stipulation and order was filed as to the use of any evidence sought to be excluded in states SF 190 and SF 212. It was signed by the state defense counsel and by the defendant. The state would still prefer on the record that there be a colloquy of the defendant, that he is fully informed of the waiver of this mitigation.
all right, would you mind handing me a copy of that, please, so I can reference it? All right, Mr. Cruz, please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? You can put your hand down. Please state your full name for the record.
Nikolas Cruz.
Sir, last week, which would have been August 15th through and including August 19th, we had a full week scheduled for your lawyers to present scientific evidence as reason to allow, to convince the court to allow in certain scientific neuroimaging. The state was objecting, however, we were going to have a full evidentiary hearing on that issue, and I was going to decide whether or not the scientific evidence meets the Daubert standard. Your lawyers, the morning of or the day before, decided to withdraw their request to present this evidence to the jury in this case. Are you aware of that? Are you aware that I did not decide whether or not this evidence was going to be admissible because we didn't have the hearing?
Yeah.
Okay, and do you have any questions about that decision by your lawyers?
No.
And I assume this was some type of strategy, and quite frankly, it's none of my business. You all can do what you want to do and present your case the way you want to present it. I just need to make sure that you have been explained the reasoning behind the withdrawing of this specific evidence.
Yes, ma'am.
And you do understand. Has anyone threatened or coerced you into making that decision?
No, ma'am.
Has anyone made you any promises or guarantees as to what the outcome may be in reference to withdrawing this specific evidence?
No, ma'am.
Okay. I find the defendant's made a knowing, voluntary waiver of his right to present this scientific evidence and have this heard by the court. And that's it.
Your Honor,
Thank you.
Did you have an opportunity to,
Sorry, go ahead.
go ahead.
I did. I signed an order this morning, granting your request for additional time based upon my review of the records.
How about Dr. Holmes also?
You all didn't ask me about Dr. Holmes.
She's the expert that I'm going to take her deposition on Labor Day.
I thought it was Hold on just a second. I was under the impression it was Dr. Connor.
Yeah, that's for this afternoon.
The expert that you were asking for 3 hours instead of 1 hour, which expert was that?
That's Connor. But, you know, I don't want to be limited on Dr. Holmes either.
Okay, I wasn't aware. I thought that you were taking only one and that Ms. Schifoni was taking the others and that you were okay with the time limit except for Dr. Connor.
No, so we said, Mr. Giuffoni and I said we can do it on Thursday, because that was the first thing.
Okay.
We didn't want to be limited. It wasn't about Dr. Holmes. Dr. Holmes is available, you know, so on Labor Day, so I don't want to be limited to an hour. She's set for the whole day. I don't think the defense has any objection.
I thought we agreed on 3. Work on the, you got enough?
But
3 hours?
with Dr. Holmes?
Yeah.
I think that should be.
Yeah, that'll work, then we don't have a problem.
Okay, so that's fine then. I only did a written order on Dr. Connor, but based on the agreement, I'll include Dr. Holmes in that order too. And State, do you want your,
Yeah.
information back? I've already reviewed it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.